Hi, my name is Lindsay Morgan, and today I'm going to be presenting my extreme makeover for NU 713, Organizational and System Leadership for the Advanced Practice Nurse. Learning objectives include explaining a time when miscommunication created a problem, discussing and defining the patterns of relating, patterns of meeting, organizational culture, ways of talking, and innovation in my organization during this time. Transforming the story of miscommunication into an inspirational one through the use of effective communication. One chaotic Sunday on the med-surg unit that I was working on at the time, a major miscommunication, or shall I say lack of communication, occurred. There was a patient who was very sick and had to have a rapid response called during his dialysis that morning. After the rapid response was called, because of his lethargy, several diagnostic tests were ordered. My coworker, who was assigned this patient, had finally went to lunch that afternoon, and she got a call that this patient's heart rate had dropped to 40. We both went running to the patient's room. When we got there, the patient and the bed were gone. The wife was alarmed, and so were we. Where was the patient? When a patient is taken off the floor, a ticket to ride is supposed to be filled out by the transporter, and the nurse is supposed to be notified of where the patient is being taken. The wife said the patient had gone down for test. But which test? He had an ultrasound and a CT ordered. We run to the desk and look at the transport book in which the transporters are supposed to sign the patients out. There was no entry. The monitor room is continuing to call and say the heart rate of the patient is continuing to drop. The transporter was also supposed to inform the monitor room of where the patient will be located, and he did not. So the nurse assigned to the patient and the tech who was assigned to the patient took off running, one to CT and one to radiology. I stayed at the desk, and the monitor room called and said that the patient was in asystole. This patient was a full code. I was panicked. I called the Nextel of my two coworkers to notify them. They had still not been able to locate the patient. After what seemed like an eternity, the transporter came wheeling the patient down the hall as if nothing was wrong. The charge nurse and I ran to the patient, and once we reached the room, we started CPR and called the code. The patient was revived and sent to the ICU, but he ultimately passed away that night. The aftermath. Afterwards, a conference was held, including us nurses, the nurse manager, the CNO, the CEO, the transport supervisor, and the transporter. This meeting was focused on who was to blame instead of what could have been done differently to avoid the situation. Factors that I believe that contributed to this situation are understaffing. Why did the transporter have to be in such a hurry? Was he expected to do the work of two transporters? Why did no one realize the patient was taken out of this room? Staff was too busy and no one was at the desk at the time of transport. I also feel that inadequate education was the problem. So, what was the organization of conversation at this time? What did we talk about around the lunch table? Well, during this time, the themes of conversation were always pretty negative. We were dissatisfied with our workload. There was unsafe nurse-to-patient ratio, unfair wages, no trust in management, and ineffective communication amongst the healthcare team. What is culture of organization? According to Kilman, culture is to the organization what personality is to the individual. a hidden yet unifying theme that provides meaning, direction, and mobilization. Organizational culture is the culture that exists within an organization. It differs from societal culture in that it is composed of the shared philosophy, ideology, beliefs, hopes, and perceptions that create unity amongst an organization. This includes the organization's mission and vision. In order for an organization to be successful, the culture must include innovation, aggressiveness, outcome orientation, stableness, people-oriented, team-oriented, and detail-oriented leaders. So I did a lot of research trying to find the mission or vision statement for the organization that I worked at this time, and I was not able to find it anywhere. So to me, this says something about the organization in itself. Patterns of relating. How do people interact with each other? On the unit I worked on, we all communicated very well with each other. We could almost finish each other's sentences. However, it felt like the patterns of relating with leadership and administration was almost non-existent. No one knew how to communicate with their leaders because oftentimes we were almost always shut down, or the problem we presented was never actually addressed. Patterns of meaning. What themes existed within this organization? I believe this organization's mission was to make a profit no matter the cost to the employees or the patients. There was a theme of mistrust amongst employees versus administration, because when the nurses would bring up patient safety issues such as short staffing, we would be overwhelmed trying to provide quality care for our patients, and we would get new admissions popping up as soon as the patient was discharged. I think the supervisors thought we were trying to avoid more work, but we truly had the patient's safety at heart. Ways of being together and meaning. Meaning is a social construction. According to Mead, meaning arises in the gesture-response interactions among people that occur in a medium of symbols. A gesture is a kind of symbol. The word symbol came from the Greek word symbolon, which is a mark or token. A gesture made by one person that is responded to by another is a symbol. Meaning is created in the response to the gesture. If you were asked to name someone that is innovative, you may name somebody from pop culture, but it could just as easily be a coworker or an administrator. Capacity for innovation, for leadership, for improvisation. In order to do so, we must build and maintain trust in relationships, be curious and actively listen instead of dismissing. This can make the conversation more engaging. The big reveal. So it's time to reveal our extreme makeover. Let's tell a story with a happier ending. By changing the current patterns of relating, patterns of meaning, ways of talking, and use of skilled innovatives, this narrative can be changed. I believe this whole situation could have been avoided by changing the culture of the organization, by moving away from an organization as a machine and towards an organization as conversation. With relational leading, administration would have been open-minded and listened in the present to staff about the state of the organization and understand that understaffing can cause patient harm. If properly staffed, the transporter would have had time to make sure the nurse was aware that the patient was leaving the floor. Staff would have been available to assist him in using the correct protocol for transport. Ultimately, the patient would have received immediate resuscitation and possibly lived a longer life.